I started this pod book by suggesting that the simplest way of understanding a spiritual experience is that it's when we feel there's more going on here than just our socio-biological lives. Amazing as they are, there's more. And one of the ways that is often experienced is with what I've called magical narrative experiences. And that's a wide category to include a lot of different things. When we experience life as dreamlike or enchanted, magical. So in this chapter, I want to explore why I think we should not just simply dismiss those experiences as illusory, but take them seriously. And I say that from a lifetime exploring them, but that we need to, like everything that I'm suggesting in this pod book, understand them in a radically new way. And we need to not just retreat into, well, it's magic. The rational mind can't understand all of that, which makes it part of a different world, a supernatural world. It's kind of a surrender of our inquisitiveness. But what I'm suggesting is that there can be ways we can understand how these magical events fit with our biological and physical experience. And what I've got to offer is just the beginning. The whole of this philosophy is just the beginning of a way of conceiving of it, which I have found very attractive, worthy of further investigation, which is what I've been doing for the last long period of my life. And now wanting to go, hey, if I share this with others and others feel like that also, then there'll be more people seeing where this might lead, this type of approach. All right, so what do I mean by magical narrative experiences? Well, one of the simplest would be what Carl Jung and Pauli called a synchronicity. Now, that's interesting in itself that we've got a top psychologist, one of the founders of psychology, and a Nobel Prize winning physicist, who are both going, these strange things happen, these significant events, which are coincidences, but they have meaning. They're more than coincidences. How does that happen? Let me give you an example. I've had so many of these. Most people I know have had numbers and numbers of these in their lives. I've had more than my fair share, I suspect. And one of the earliest is probably the one I'll share, because I put this in my TED Talk because it's such a lovely one. Because, well, you'll see. I'm sitting meditating as a young man on my bed, and a book falls from the shelf above me, big, heavy book, and opens up right in front of me. And in my meditation, I've been doing a visualization of the Egyptian god Osiris. It's part of my exploration of Western esotericism. And the book that's fallen down is one of the collected works of Carl Jung, the man who coined the word synchronicity. And it's opened on a passage in which he's talking about Osiris. It's a coincidence, but it's a hell of a coincidence. Now, there's a good reason it fell down. A train went past and I was near the train, shook the whole building, it fell down. But that it fell down and it was that book of all the books I had, and that it opened on that page made it like a dream. It had meaning to me. What's that? You may have had it. What is that? Another type of magical coincidence or magical event would be when I was running a retreat many, many, many years later. It's a new year, and I am going to let off some fireworks. We're in a beautiful, beautiful big house overlooking the ruins of Glastonbury Abbey. And I go out into the night. It's a beautiful night. The moon is full and it has an aura around it. And it looks so beautiful. I say to everyone, come out now and look at the moon. And everyone, there's about 50 of us, come out and look at the moon. And we've just been practicing connecting by focusing on each other's eyes, by gazing at each other. And it has taken us to this immense place of love, just overwhelming love, and a sense of the greater than us, what is traditionally called God. And then while all 50 of us are looking in the sky, the corona, which is a rainbow corona by now, which is surrounding it in a circle, forms a perfect eye with the moon as the pupil over Glastonbury, the ruins of Glastonbury Abbey. And probably if it hadn't been there with so many people, I might have thought, wow, did I make that up? It was just perfect. It formed, we saw it, it touched us, and then it went. Now, I'm sure there's good reasons why that can happen. But that it happened in that way then made the whole experience incredibly moving. And there was a sense of, for a moment, life became like a dream. What is that? What is that moment where life seems to be reflecting back to you what you've been doing or what you intend to do? And then there is straightforward intention, or good old-fashioned magic, which is where you have an intention and it happens. Shamans have been doing this since the earliest of times to bring about the game, to cause healing. My experience is not to do with that, but I did have an experience which is too big to relate in detail, but I'll give you the essence of it, which is that I find myself at a course in a centre in Spain that I'm sent there because I'm in a bit of a state, to be honest with you. And I, at that time, am a musician. It's before I'm a writer. And I want to create this album about caring for the earth. And I want to create a video based on a message that's come across from the Kogi Indians of Colombia. I'm very touched by it. I really want to do this, but I have nothing. I have no money, nothing, absolutely nothing. But I'm on this course, this new course, sort of thing that hadn't happened before, where you envisage something so powerfully it happens. And what the hell, let's just give it a go. And I do. And I really envisage that I will have a really good quality, what was then a 24-track recording studio was a big deal. And that I'll make this album and I'll make this video. The resources will just come. And then within 2-3 weeks of getting back from this event, I was installing a 24-track recording studio into this manor house where I was living with some other people. And we created the album, and the video went on to be shown at the UN and came second, actually, in a BBC music video, environmental music video awards. What was that? Is this all coincidence? And there's many more around that event, which I could tell you, but that'll do for now. So what are these different events? And another one that comes to mind is when people experience messages from the dead. And I'm going to tell someone else's story because they've just told it to me really recently and it touched me. And I just thought, well, this happened while I'm working on this pod book. I'll just share it. And it's someone I trust, not someone I think makes things up or exaggerates. And I've heard so many of these, I'm ready to take it on face value. What is it? In this case, it's a lady who had a loved one die. She's with her friend. She expresses something we often do, goes, oh, I wish I had a message from her that everything was all right. And her friend said, well, what was she into? How might she communicate with you? And she said, well, I was into birds. Maybe a bird will bring me a message. And they went, yeah, maybe. Let's be open to that and see what happens. And then immediately afterwards, she's in her kitchen. She hears a noise. I think it's at the back door. And she thinks, what's that? And she undoes her back door. And there, in the middle of a average house in an average place, in the garden, is a peacock. What's that? Well, a peacock can get itself into somebody's garden in the middle of where you wouldn't expect a peacock to ever be. Of course. But that it happened in that way then. What's that? So all of those very different events and things we need to understand in different ways, I want to put them all together and say, let's call them all magical narrative experiences. And one of the things which a lot of people have commented on is that with the rise of a kind of reductionist, materialist, there's only the physical and the biological, that's all there is approach to understanding this, we've lost that sense of enchantment. The universe has become disenchanted. And it looks like the alternative is just to go back to a more mythic, poetic understanding. And they are lovely. I love myths and poetry. But I'm not sure that's the way to go. What I've been suggesting, as you'll know by now, is that we go forward into a post-scientific spirituality, which goes, let's understand everything within an evolutionary context, but let's not stop with biology. Let's understand that the psyche is a level of emergence, that there's a whole psycho-ecology, and that psycho-ecology, what I've called the imaginos, the imaginal level of reality, is what spirituality has been exploring, and it's absolutely important if we want to understand reality that we include it. So let's see if we can understand these magical narrative events in a robust, rational way. So I want to say, look, we can dismiss this. There's a apophenia, it's called, is when you see patterns that aren't there. That's for real. It absolutely happens. People get a pancake and they think, oh, look, it's a picture of Jesus. Well, maybe it's a magical narrative event and really means something to them. Maybe it's just crazy. It's easy, we need to be discerning. We need to be discerning. But I don't think we can dismiss all of them in that way as just seeing patterns that aren't there. Misperception. And I don't want to go to they're supernatural. I want to see everything as natural, and I want to suggest the beginnings of a way of understanding this that I think could be fruitful. So Carl Jung and Pauli, great men, they said, look, there's more than physical causality going on. And they looked for what that other thing might be. And my hypothesis is that they're right, and that we need to understand, in the last chapter I talked about, look, we're in an informational matrices in which all the different levels of information are causal. They're all affecting each other. And that the psyche is causal. It does stuff. It's doing it now to make me speak. And what I want to suggest here is that we need to understand that psycho-causality, causation on the level of the psyche, is, another word for it might be narrative causality, that we create narratives with the psyche. It's where we understand our lives, who we are, what's going on, all of that. We categorize and we narrate a story of who we are. And we know we can create whole worlds with those stories. That's what dreams are in the psyche. What I want to suggest here is that narrative making, dreaming, can impact the lower levels. So in previous chapters, I discussed psi-sensing, that it had evolved so that the system could sense its own processing, but that it had expanded so it could sense the whole of infoverse, everything, potentially. And that was a way of coming to understand what all of these psychic experiences are and spiritual experiences are. Here I want to suggest that psycho-causality has arisen to begin with as the psyche, the imaginal level, having a causal effect on the body, so I can speak or raise my hands or do all the things that I do. But that it has also expanded out and could have an effect on the lower levels generally. And that effect is narrative. So that the intentions that we create in our stories are forming attractors, as it were, that move the flow of events in certain directions. That's what happened when this recording studio arrived, with the understanding that I'm suggesting. I created a strong goal or telos or attractor, an intention, and the story of my life moved in that direction until it arrived. But here's what I'm saying. I'm not saying it's miraculous, magical, because it's being created by the imaginal level of reality. It's using images to create a change. but not miraculous in the sense that it's not overriding the laws of physics. I didn't come home and there was a recording studio. No, there was a understandable sequence of events that led to the right people turning up at the right time to provide finance and blah, 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 and to help me, and bang, in a very short period, it had happened. So what I'm suggesting is that the narrative that I created was having a influence, and that it was able to do that. Now, here's the thing. What I'm suggesting is this whole informational matrix is like all of these different causalities happening, including my intention, but also your intention, all of our intentions. And each one of us has so many intentions, from little trivial things like I intend to make a cup of tea to I really want to do this, or be an astronaut when you're a kid, and that all of that is is part of a narrative causality. So the whole ecosystem of the soul is this whole soup of narratives and intentions. And most of those are unconscious. It's like the ones we make conscious are small, I suspect, in comparison to all the unconscious ones. And there's all those as well. So the chances of anything working in that way, well, it's slim. It all depends on how easily that can happen. So, if I had been in that space of, I really can intend this, and I'd intended peace in the Middle East, I suspect it might not have happened. It's just too difficult for it to fall into place. But this, there was a space for it. But it doesn't always happen, and that's key. In fact, I think it mostly doesn't. But when it does happen, it's so dramatic, you really notice it. That's the nature, I think, with all these magical narrative events. It's that the play of narrative causality is happening all the time. We just don't generally notice it. And mostly we are not personally affecting much. But then when we do, or when you suddenly notice the magical nature, like a synchronicity happens, it may not mean much, but it does feel like a glitch in the matrix. So you're going, oh, hang on, there's a narrative level to reality, when you might have been living in a very narrow way where you don't think that's true. So one of the things it often does is it wakes people up. A lot of people wake up for the first time through synchronicities, because that's when they go, there's more going on here, isn't there? And there is. There really, really is a lot more going on than just our socio-biological lives. And you get a glimpse of it. Oh, there's another level to this, and there is. So here's a really important thing that I want to get across that's important for how we live our lives. What I'm suggesting is that in the same way that I've said, look, the world isn't just there and you read it. The world is there. But what you experience is the relationship between your categories, your ideation and your instincts, all the ways you categorize and narrate what the world is, and the world that's there, what's there. And your ideation is as trustworthy, true, as your ability to get close to what is actually there. But what you experience is the meeting of your perceiving and what is being perceived. Okay, that's why we need to be very careful with how we can move on our ideation. Now, what I'm suggesting here is something similar, but but in terms of what happens, not just what we perceive, but what happens, which is the way that we categorize and narrate our lives, the story we tell about our lives, which may or may not be trustworthy. We can tell stories about our lives that we find later are just wildly inaccurate, and we need to search and improve that. Very much is a really important thing to search for something trustworthy. But whether trustworthy or not, the way in which what we experience is a meeting of those two, the story we tell and what's actually happening. And we have to do our best to get the story we tell accurate. But whatever story we're telling, I think it is having a causal effect on what happens. So that we have this phenomena which most people, I think, who have a spiritual life experience, which is from time to time, it's like life is being mirrored back to you. And it can be in a beautiful way and it can be in a troubling way. Carl Jung once said something which fascinates me. He said about a patient that he was getting worried that if this patient didn't see the thing that the unconscious thing they couldn't see, they'd get hit by a bus. And what was so striking about that is he was going, look, if they can't see a thing about themselves, their live events will arrange themselves that they have some dramatic event to either wake them up or kill them. I mean, whatever that meant, I don't know. But the idea there is life the events of life can interact with the way you're narrating it, and not just consciously. Here with the Jung example, it was unconsciously, so that you can see your life is feeding back to you the way that you're narrating your life, and that therefore it is in that way teaching you. And that's a big part, I think, of the experience of people on the spiritual path. And this is a way of understanding how that's happening. That the ecosystem of narrative causality is affecting the lower levels. Just like I'm affecting the body with making it move, just like my body's affecting physics by moving things about and breathing in the air and the things I've discussed before. The whole ecosystem is all of these different intentions or goals, or each one is a telos, an attractor, which is pulling the story in that direction. So, I'd like just to ask you, as we talk about this, and you can think about it later, have you had that? Do you ever feel like life is telling you something, that it's leading you in some way, that it's warning you in some way, that it's a kind of a message? This is what I'm trying to explain. It's a very important type of magical narrative experience, but not everything. Mostly not. Because the effect that your intentionality, your narrative, your unconscious is having on the way things work out is just one amongst all the people that you're interacting with. So some of it is significant like that, but mostly not. And thank goodness, it'd be a bit overwhelming if it was all of it, wouldn't it? And then there's another experience which happens from time to time, which seems immensely important on the spiritual journey of evolution to me. And that's the feeling of divine intervention or providence. When something happens and it feels this is not just the message, this is a message from God, or the super soul, as I would call it. And I think we can explore the idea that well, how does that super soul interact with the rest of the universe? Well, it's on the level of the psyche, so it's like a super psyche. So it psi senses the universe. I think it's my intuition is it's psi sensing you and me right now. It's psi sensing everything. That's what it's able to do, much more than me or an individual. That communion of souls is able to psi sense on another level. And that it also is affecting its psycho-causality, its soul causality is on another level as well. So that it can move your life in a direction towards the good, in the direction towards the more emergent. And I think this can help us understand the arbitrary seeming way in which that manifests, where it's like, well, that feels like an intervention, but why not all the time? That feels like a prayer answered, but why not all the time? Well, because that supersoul is another system. It's a big system, but it's another system within the great ecosystem of causal influence. It's not running the show. It can't do anything it wants, but that it's trying to move everything all the time towards the good. And sometimes it can, and sometimes it can't. And when it can, it goes, wow, you see it, and it's beautiful. And then mostly it can't. But when you tune into it, when you come into communion, there is that feel that you do get, I do anyway, that profound sense of, oh, it's always willing the good for me. That's what it's doing. And when I tune into it, it becomes easier to see that and for that to happen. All right. So let's look at some things I'm not saying before we wrap this chapter on magic up. I'm not saying these events are miraculous. Not miraculous, but they are magical, but not miraculous. I've talked about that. And I'm not saying that this is absolute. It's not just like the whole thing is being run by the narrative level. No, it's being run by all the levels interacting, and it's certainly not being run just by your narrative level. And that's the mistake I see often from things like The Secret and karma, according to certain interpretations, is everything that happens to you is a result of your intentionality. That idea. So if you get ill, it's you intended it. You intended it. Or the karma idea. Oh, it's your bad karma. Everything that happens is your good karma or your bad karma. Everything that happens is your conscious or unconscious intentions. And if it doesn't work out, it's because you didn't intend strong enough, or you've got counter intentions that pull you in another direction and you're messing it all up. Well, I think there's something in that, as I've said. That's what I'm sharing with you. But it's not absolute. You don't run everything that happens. There's a lot of other psyches involved. A lot. And you're just one. And the people in your lives aren't just pawns in the outplaying of your psycho-narratives. They're also human beings with their own. And what will happen, the events that take place, will be an interaction of all of that. So let's get rid of that. The idea of fate, there's another idea, another deterministic idea that you will gather by now I hate, which is it's all fated, it's all given. Everything that happens to you is fated. Not that. But I do think we can talk about destiny, for instance, if we understand it differently, like a destination. Like, if I set off and say, my destination is to drive to London from where I live in Glastonbury. That's my destination. Will I reach there? Maybe. That's up for grabs. It's not fixed. But I have a destination and I will move in that direction. And a bit like the sat-nav, you get lost and the sat-nav says, turn around when you can and go this way. And I think life's a bit like that. It redirections. Oh, that's not going to work out, so we'll try this way. And the intention to reach the destination can play out. And you can have a strong sense of that. Destiny sometimes, I suspect, before we're even born, we may be putting these intentions in place, which life will move us towards. I feel that's why I'm doing this pod book, if I'm honest. It just feels like, this is what I have to do. And I don't know how well I'll do it, but I'll give it my best shot because I intended this deep in my soul a long, long time ago, and now it's here. So I got to give it a go. And that's why I work so hard all the time to do it. It's coming from that sense of life has moved me towards this, and I recognize it. Okay, the other one thing I want to say is this narrative causality, it's not good, it's neutral. Can be good, but in itself it's neutral. It's, it's like magic. An awful lot of magic in the past, most of it I think, is what we would call black magic. It's like using this intentionality to hurt your enemies, your love rivals, so you're not just healing, you're also harming. And the same natural processes. This is a natural part of the universe, I'm suggesting, which I would like to see as harnessed for good, but we can also harness it for harm. And that magical sense of, oh, look, there's a narrative level to reality, there's more going on. That can occur in good situations, but it happens a lot, I think, in cults, in religious cults. I think it's why people often stay or join religious cults. They're just like, oh, what's happening? There's all this synchronicity and there's this magic happening, and they take that as a pointer. Oh, this is a good thing. Well, it's not. It's just that it's a natural function of the universe that if you intend, and it's more likely to happen, I think, often in spiritual states. So if you are exploring, which people in cults are too, these higher levels of emergence, they're more likely to occur. Then the magical events are much more likely to occur. But not always good. And not always effective. I mean, I've said that already, but let me just say it again. Here's a little example from me. After I had magically manifested this huge studio, I thought, I had a bit of a thing about Van Morrison, because of beautiful spiritual music he was making at the time, had a big impact on my soul. Oh, it would be lovely to meet Van. Well, why don't I imagine and envisage that he comes to visit me in this manor house I'm living in? That'd be great. Let's really see that and see if I can make that happen. And I did. It did happen. It was very unlikely that it would, but he did. He came to visit somebody else who was also living in the big manor house. But here's the thing, I wasn't there. I was on holiday with my parents. And there's a lot of that. It's like, it's a naturalistic causal event. So the narrative kind of had an effect, but didn't quite work, because that's how causality always is, isn't it? I intend this to happen physically. And, I want to throw the ball there. And maybe it gets there, and maybe it gets near there, and not quite where I wanted to throw it. That's how causality works. And the narrative, I think, is the same. And then the other thing is that some of these events, and I've touched on this already, some of them are really important, it feels to me, and then others not so much. They're just funny. I've had lots of synchronicities that haven't led anywhere, but they're funny. And they're like little reminders. Oh, there's a dream level to this reality. And that dream level, you can just go into the dream level, as in dreams, but also it can make this level dreamlike. And when it does, it brings a smile to your face. It doesn't necessarily mean follow it. There was a time when a synchronicity happened, I think, I've got to follow where that's pointing. Where's it pointing? Now, no. Maybe. That I need a level of discernment. I need to sense the event and discern whether to go down that road, whichever road it is I think it's leading to, or maybe not. And that's I found to be a wiser approach. All right. So what have I been trying to say? I've been trying to say, look, there's a whole range of what I've been calling magical narrative events that make the world enchanted. And the world is enchanted, and it's beautiful when it's obvious. And I want to say, look, we can understand this in a natural way. It's not supernatural. It's not miraculous. It's a magical effect of the level of narrative on the other levels. And it's magical simply because it's coming from the imaginal. There's a psycho-causality or narrative causality that can shape the events. It can't override the passivity of the lower levels. It must accommodate them, but it can move them and shift them in certain directions. That's what the higher levels do all the time. They shift the passivity of the lower levels into the directions that it wants to take them in. And we can understand this as different levels of essentially information, all interacting in this one great causal matrix. So maybe I'll just say a little bit, maybe helpful of where I've ended up with this on my life journey, which is that I start to see that the way that I narrate my life affects what happens, for good and bad. And that what I'm looking for is the most trustworthy understanding of my life, myself and my life, as I can possibly find. And without naivety. And as well, within that, it's important, I feel now, to look for the good that can come from it. And I feel this collectively as well, when I look at us, the journey we're on collectively, to have a vision as accurately, as truthful, as trustworthy as I can find, and for it to keep evolving, not naive, wise as I can be. But also as well, to see the way it could move, to set up an intentionality, to see a vision that it's moving towards something good, because I'm seeing that potential for good within my life, within our journey. And that by doing that, I contribute to the possibility of it moving in that direction, which is the direction that I want it to. Which is why this philosophy that I'm wanting to share is essentially so hopeful. Not a naive hope, I hope. A realistic hope, but a hope nevertheless. And then with the events that happen, for me, it's like, you have dreams, and most of them for me, I ignore. But sometimes there's a dream, it just goes, oh, pay that attention. And then I'll sense it. I'll analyze it to see what it means to me, what I can learn from it. And magical events are like that. Often I'll let them go, just have a smile. And then when I think, oh, that's important, I'll apply my intuition to them consciously and see, oh, what is there? So I'm avoiding that gullibility that just sees significance where it isn't there, and that naivety, but also I'm avoiding the cynicism which ignores an important level of this enchanted universe that we live in, a universe which has evolved to be enchanted. And personally, I don't spend a lot of time envisaging the things I want to happen in a magical way. I do that. And I envisage doing this pod book, and I've worked meticulously to envisage it. Each chapter I envisage, and of course, but I'm not doing that. I'm doing that to enable me to do it. And I think that will have an effect, a magical narrative effect, but that's why I'm doing it. I'm not doing it. I'm not just sitting there envisaging. Rather, what I think is important is to spend that energy in communing with the supersoul, with God, and aligning my intentionality with this greater benevolent, loving intentionality as best as I can. So I want to end with a little game suggesting something that in the period between now and when you listen to the next chapter, or as long as you like, try out something I found really good, which is wishing well to people, everyone. You send an email, you write, best wishes. What if that is significant? What if that's, no, best wishes, and that it's sending out a positive narrative, a causally narrative idea. I want things to be good for you. I really do. I actually want that. And that's my intention. And I wish you goodness. So one thing I love to do is when I'm walking down the street or I'm sitting having a coffee is just look around and wish that person well, and that person well, and my loved ones well. And if I wake in the middle of the night, just go through all of them, wishing them well, and see what it feels like. I really like it. I'm aware that different people are attracted to different aspects of the philosophy I'm exploring. So as we go through in this pod book, I don't want to stay in one area for too long. I want to be able to move about now within the overall narrative that I've been exploring. So in the next chapter, we're going to make a jump right to the beginning. I want to explore what I mean by the one that arises as everything. What is the one?